America was very lucky to purchase Louisiana territory from France at a bargain price. However, even though its land had been doubled, the United States was still only a new country in power compared to European countries because it had only just achieved independence from Britain. And even after independence, British merchant ships sailing across the Atlantic tormented the United States, hijacking American ships and manipulating American Indians behind the scenes to create a negative relationship with the United States. So the situation was very difficult for the United States. In other words, to America, Britain was a pirate. In 1812, the United States could no longer stand the conflict and declared war on Britain. So the hostility between the two countries finally exploded. Another war broke out between the United States and Britain. Washington, D.C. became a sea of fire in the war between the United States and Great Britain. The war was very fierce, but in the end, the American-British War ended without a clear winner. The 3-year battle was over and a draw was declared with then superpower England. Seeing the United States fighting against Britain, even European powers did not underestimate the United States. In 1823, the 5th President of the United States, James Monroe, declared a policy of isolation and took an independent course. Instead of opposing European interference any longer, it was a declaration that the United States would not interfere with Europe. The United States, rejecting European interference in this way, began to move west into the American continent. U.S. dominion, which had been concentrated in the east, began to extend to the west, opening the beginning of the era of full-scale Western pioneering. In 1830, during Andrew Jackson's tenure as the 7th president, many remaining American Indians suffered deportation or death. Jackson embodied the belief that whites were superior to other races, so he signed the Indian Relocation Act. Most of the remaining American Indians were forcibly moved to the West. In the early days of the founding of the country, the Indians were paid the highest respect, and land and property was not taken without their consent. But it wasn't long before the American Indians, who were the original stewards of North American land, were driven out by force. In the end, the indigenous people were driven out of their original territory and forced to migrate to Indian reservations. Poorly armed American Indians were forced to engage in unwinnable battles with whites. Even though they knew they would be defeated, and after America's savage genocide, they were forced to leave their original homes and embark on a journey of pain and tears. Chief Black Hawk, a commander in the Indian Wars, was brought before President Jackson, and he said without hesitation, "I'm a human being, but you are a different kind." On their way from present-day Georgia to Oklahoma, about 1,000 kilometers away, American Indians suffered from starvation and cold, which killed thousands of people. In the United States, a two-party system was established as the forces supporting President Andrew Jackson and those opposed to him were divided. The first two political parties in the United States were consolidated into the Democratic and Republican parties respectively. And the United States maintains two major systems, the Democrats and the Republicans, to this day. By the mid-19th century, with territorial changes, Americans increasingly crossed the borders to do business and migrate to Texas, Mexico. Entrepreneurs from the United States continued to come to Texas to make a fortune, and the place was overcrowded with American settlers. So the conflict between Americans and Mexicans began. Those conflicts developed into clashes between Americans and Mexicans, and the number of clashes increased. But the Americans in Texas began to advocate for the establishment of an independent country. So, in 1836, the Republic of Texas was suddenly established, the United States was also looking for the opportunity to support Texas behind the scenes. The problem was that most of the people who founded the Republic of Texas were businessmen, so it was very difficult to run the country that suddenly emerged. Because of this, Texas had no choice but to rely on the United States, which was comprised of the same people. Mexico, on the other hand, couldn't stand to watch parts of its mainland be annexed by the United States. A preemptive attack by Mexico led to war with the United States. This was the war between the United States and Mexico in 1846. In Mexico, soldiers as well as civilians stood up and continued the decisive battle. But the war ended with the U.S. victory due to the continued attack by the U.S. As a result of the war, the vast land of the Republic of Texas was transferred to the United States and became the present-day state of Texas, and Mexico remained traumatized and a tremendous tragedy for 100 years to this day. In addition, the United States signed a treaty with Mexico to purchase vast territories such as California, Nevada, and Arizona at a low price. This treaty was also semi-coercive. In the state of Texas, which was taken over by the United States, a huge amount of oil was discovered, and Texas Intermediate crude oil, one of the world's 3 major oil types, was born. Also purchased from Mexico, Arizona has the world's greatest canyon, the Grand Canyon, which now attracts thousands of tourists as an American national treasure. Also, gold was pouring out of California, and the United States was bringing in a huge treasure trove from Mexico. The territorial expansion was a huge fortune for America. From 1848, an enormous number of people flocked to California to search for gold, and this phenomenon was called the Gold Rush. Gold miners began to be called 49ers because the gold rush to California peaked in 1849. California's population increased by a whopping 6 times in 1 year, and the gold rush began with people from all over the country flocking there to mine for gold. Immediately after independence in 1790, the population of the United States had grown from only 3.9 million to about 20 million by 1850.